2020 budget passed in Parliament without a vote. 2 more deaths related to COVID-19 reported. Army commander requests those affected by COVID-19 to come forward without any fear. Inmates undergoing quarantine demand for PCR tests to be carried out. Police to use drones to monitor areas marked as isolated areas. 15th Drone Regiment of the Sri Lanka Army inaugurated. Proposed wildlife management reserve on the verge of destruction.
A very good evening to you and welcome to Primetime News. I'm Sandro Ferdinando. Let's start off with a look at your local news. Army Commander Lieutenant General Shavendra Silla, who heads the National Operations Center for the Prevention of COVID-19 outbreak, has requested individuals infected with COVID-19 to avoid being in hiding.
The Health Ministry's secretary has informed us that only 5 deaths have been caused directly due to COVID-19 in the country. The others have been experiencing chronic ailments for a long period. During the last few days, we observed that some bedridden individuals, including a cancer patient, had died due to the virus. Therefore, we urge individuals to avoid being in hiding or concealing their conditions of being positive for the virus. In a country in which ambulance services are available throughout multiple areas are isolated, a person or their family member must understand that not all patients who contracted the virus have died. The mortality rate of the infection is less than 1%. Therefore, come forward and obtain the relevant medical advice if you have been infected.
ලබාගත යුතු සෞඛ්‍ය උපදෙස් ලබාගෙන ජීවත් වීමට වැඩ කටයුතු කරන්න උත්සාහ කරන්න ඕනේ.
යම් ක්‍රියාකාරක බැරෑරුම් තත්ත්වයක් නේද මේ වෙනකොට තිබෙන්නේ.
කොවිඩ් රටෙන් තුරන් කරන තුරු
Unless the virus is eliminated from the country, we have to say that the situation is dangerous.
බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා මේක එක් පුද්ගලයෙක්ගෙන් තවත් පුද්ගලයෙක්ට යන ක්‍රමවේදය හැරුණකොට උලව වෙන්නේ තත්වයක්. ඉතින් ඒකින්ද මේක රටේ ජනතාව
Therefore, the public needs to abide by the directives issued by the health authorities while conducting their daily activities to the maximum extent possible.
සෞඛ්‍ය අමාත්‍යාංශය නැත්නම් සෞඛ්‍ය විශේෂඥවරුන් දෙන උපදෙස් වලට අනුව ක්‍රියා කරමින් කටයුතු කිරීම තමයි වැදගත් වෙන්නේ.
දැන් සතියන්තයේ ඇඳරි නීතිය යොදවන්න යම්කිසි බලාපොරොත්තුවක් තියෙනවද?
සතියන්තයේ ඇඳරි නීතියක්
We don't hope to do that. We haven't imposed curfew in any part of the country. We will approach the weekend in 3 days. Therefore, we may impose curfews or place certain areas under isolation if there is a requirement. However, we are not hoping to impose a curfew targeting a specific reason. There is no need to impose a curfew if there is a religious festival.
කියලා දාන්න කිසිම හේතුවක් නැහැ. උත්සවයක් තියෙනවා කියලා ඇඳරි නීතියක් දාන්න කිසිම අවශ්‍යතාවයක් නැහැ.
ඔබ දන්නවා ඊයේ දවසේ වෙන විට කොළඹ නගර සභා සීමාව තුළ
As you are all aware, we carried out random PCR tests yesterday on 5% of the people within the Colombo city limits. Those random PCR tests we carried out yesterday tested positive for the virus. 5% is a large population, which also means that there are more undetected COVID-19 cases in Colombo. As per estimations, there are more than 30,000 undetected patients across the island. Although we initially estimated about 150,000 patients across the country, we might identify more patients if we increase testing.
හරියට පරීක්ෂණ කරලා හොයන්න පටන් ගත්තොත් අපිට හම්බ
Another 2 COVID-19 deaths were reported in Sri Lanka today. According to the Department of Government Information, both victims were identified as COVID-19 infected cases and were receiving treatment at the Mullaeriyawa Base Hospital where they passed away. One of the deceased was a 54-year-old male from Colombo 12 who died following COVID-19 infection related to chronic lung disease. The other was a 45-year-old male from Megoda area who died following COVID-19 related pneumonia and bacterial infection. Accordingly, the COVID-19 death toll in Sri Lanka rose to 48. Another 470 COVID-19 patients who recovered from the virus were discharged from hospitals today, bringing the total number of recoveries to 10,653. Currently, there are 4,651 active patients under medical supervision.
Meanwhile, inmates at the old Bogambara prison in Kandy staged a protest atop the building today, demanding PCR tests to be carried out on them. As a result, officers attached to the police anti-riot squad were dispatched to bring the situation under control. The prison department's commissioner for administration, Chandana Ekanayaka, told Newsfirst that 800 inmates are currently undergoing quarantine at the premises of the prison. He noted that 36 of them had tested positive for the virus.
We have already conducted 300 PCR tests at the prison. Medical officers had visited the prison today to conduct 100 PCR tests. Therefore, the inmates did not have anything to demand. They have climbed down from the building after calling off their protest. The prison inmates have been subjected to 2 PCR tests that were carried out in a space of more than 21 days. Those who tested negative have been sent to the open prison camp in Pallakale. We hope to transfer some inmates to the Mahara and Negombo prisons as well. There are about 125 inmates who are to be transferred. They would be directed to the relevant prisons based on their court proceedings. Both PCR tests carried out on these inmates had produced negative results.
Our correspondent reported that a group of inmates who had completed quarantine had been transferred to other prisons today. Restrictions were imposed on leaving the Western Province since last evening. These restrictions will be in effect until midnight on the 15th of this month. Roadblocks had also been set up on the main road connecting the Sabragamo and Western Provinces. Roadblocks had also been set up on the main road connecting the Sabragamo and Western Provinces. Senior DIG in charge of the Western Province, Deshabandhu Tennakone, arrived at the Halagala roadblock this morning to inspect the situation.
All buses and trains have been barred from exiting the Western Province. From this, we expect to restrict the spread of the virus through infected or associates of an infected person to other parts of the island. This is in effect until midnight on the 15th of this month. During this period, we expect the public to stay at home. Except for the people who are from lockdown areas, others can continue their daily activities within the provincial limits.
Our correspondent said the roadblocks had been set up near the Kochikade Bridge, bordering northwestern and western provinces. People were gathering at the main bus stand in Colombo Fort to avail themselves of public transport services. This was due to the lack of awareness about the current restrictions that are currently in place.
Despite the travel restrictions in place, we witnessed many leaving their houses and violating travel restrictions. The residents of 5 condominiums have been subjected to quarantine after certain incidences were reported adjacent to the areas. Due to such activities taking place, we decided to deploy drones covering the isolated areas. We hope to obtain the support of the Sri Lanka Air Force for this. Accordingly, drones will be deployed in the high-risk zones of Colombo North, Central Colombo and Gampaha to monitor if people are violating the restrictions on movement. After obtaining the necessary footage and data, Sri Lanka Police will deploy its personnel accompanied by the Police Special Task Force to arrest those who violate quarantine regulations.
සහ පොලිසියේ කණ්ඩායම් යොදවා අදාළ පුද්ගලයන් අත්අඩංගුවට ගැනීමට ක්‍රියා කරනු ලබනවා.
The procedure to import rapid antigen test kits for the identification of COVID-19 patients has given way to a broad discourse in the country.
Antigen
The validation process to determine the quality of the antigen test kits is being carried out at present. The evaluation reached its final stage yesterday. The technical experts who are performing the validation test are most likely to hand over their report to the Health Ministry today. Once the report is submitted, the Health Ministry's Epidemiology Unit will decide on the locations at which the test can be carried out. The public can then undergo antigen test at the designated location.
නුදුරු දිනයකදී antigen පරීක්ෂාව ආරම්භ කිරීමට නියමිතයි.
මේ මොහොතේදී මේ රැපිඩ් ඇන්ටිජන් ටෙස්ට් එක අපේ රටට අවශ්‍ය පරීක්ෂණයක් විදිහට අපි දකිනවා.
We think the rapid antigen test kits are of great importance to our country. A process was launched to validate these test kits, and we believe that the results of this validation should be made public first. After making it public, we should go forward in this matter. As the Government Medical Officers Association, we urge everyone to refrain from posing a negative influence on this process. During the final stage of analysis, bringing these kits to Sri Lanka will take some time. The government has a huge responsibility in ensuring these kits will be brought to Sri Lanka with the support of the World Health Organization. The activities which are required to be carried out after approval is obtained to introduce the vaccine to the general public is currently underway. We must understand the importance of this rapid test kit, as this was carried out on a vulnerable group. It is okay to have hopes on a vaccine. However, you must remember that a vaccine may not be a final solution from this virus. We are not sure when we will receive the vaccine. We must also be cautious of the test results in the future.
එන්නතක් ගැන අපි බලාපොරොත්තු තියාගෙන හිටියට කමක් නැහැ. නමුත් ඒක අවසන් විසඳුම කියලා කිසිම වෙලාවක හිතන්න එපා. මොකද ඒක කවද එනවද කියලා අපිට සැලකිලිමත් වෙන්න වෙනවා ඉස්සරහට එන ප්‍රතිඵලත් එක්ක.
The Sri Lanka Army, in another milestone turning point, formally raised its newest wing, the 15th Drone Regiment of the Sri Lanka Artillery, this morning. This new regiment was established under the auspices of Army Commander Lieutenant General Shavendra Silva.
The ceremony was held at the Army headquarters this morning with the participation of several high-level officials of the Sri Lanka Army. The new 15th Drone Regiment, which is a concept introduced by the Army Commander, is well equipped with high-tech cameras that enable operations for surveillance purposes in military or non-military applications. The regiment is operated together with the Sri Lanka Artillery Regiment. After the inauguration ceremony, the Army Commander observed the operations of the drones. Meanwhile, a special Bowser, a gully Bowser and a special truck used in transporting goods manufactured by the Sri Lanka Electrical and Mechanical Engineering Corps was presented to the Army Commander for inspection.
Behind these machines of this regiment, we can have everything, any equipment. Even during the 3-decade war, equipment matters, but most importantly, the man behind the equipment matters to us. We have given you the best equipment that the country can give you. We should understand we are a country with a small economy. We would love to have great equipment, but we are an army with even limited resources. Whatever we are given, we have used to the best and given the best results to the people of this nation. Therefore, I need you to go out of the box and find solutions and innovations to overcome the practical difficulties and situations to enhance the versatility of the regiment such that the asset conferred to us can be the best utilized at the interest of our country.
The third session of the webinar organized by the Pathfinder Foundation was held today. Today's concluding session was on identifying and addressing major issues, including mistrust and trust deficiency.
But I think you can expect President-elect Biden to take some early foreign policy steps. He's already said that he plans to rejoin the Paris Climate Accord on day one. He'll probably also rejoin the World Health Organization. In terms of expectations for his policy, I think we can safely assume that he's going to reaffirm the importance of our partnership with India. On China, I think it's all important for you to know that there was really very little difference between what Trump and Biden said during the campaign about China. Both of them condemned Beijing's authoritarianism, its trade practices, its policies in the South China Sea, and so forth. The main difference, I think, is that Biden promised to address these challenges by working with allies. I think he can also be expected to tone down the rhetoric that Trump and Secretary of State Pompeo regularly were trotting out. And he's likely to be more open to working with China on at least some things, like climate change.
Through our flagship Bay of Bengal initiative, we've provided more than $148 million US to Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and Maldives to build maritime security and domain awareness capabilities through coastal radar stations, data links, maritime patrol aircraft, and training. Whether it's through our bilateral cooperation, afloat readiness and training exercises with partners throughout the region, or our multilateral military exercises, such as the Malabar Naval Exercise, which includes India and Japan, and this year, Australia. We work with partners throughout the region to practice and solidify the habits of cooperation necessary to address shared threats. U.S. provided equipment and training, such as patrol ships, provided to Philippines, Vietnam, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and others.
Official data show that Sri Lanka's forest cover has been limited to 29.2% due to rampant deforestation that is taking place in the country. Today, several sensitive ecosystems in the island are facing a tragic fate, while the national policies to protect forests are ignored more often than not. A managed elephant reserve connecting the national parks in Udawalawe, Lunugambehara and Bundala had once been proposed by authorities to restore the human elephant in the Hambantota district. However, a gazette notification recognizing forest lands for the project that had been mooted by the Department of Wildlife Conservation and the Forest Department is yet to be published. Wildlife conservationists say that the habitats of around 450 wild elephants in Hambantota and its surrounding areas can be protected if only the gazette is published and the project implemented. However, the area demarcated for the proposed elephant reserve is suffering brutal destruction at the hands of those with political might. A testament to this is how hundreds of acres of forest land in the Walsapugala, Hamduruwava area in Suriwava has been grazed mercilessly for cultivation. In 2018, the Gammadha Door-to-Door initiative extensively highlighted the sufferings of the people in Walsapugala due to the long-standing human-elephant conflict. Today, herds of wild elephants in Hambantota and its surrounding areas constantly attack villagers, leaving the poor residents helpless. Forest lands in the Usgala, Andarawava, Wavegama, Upper Andarawava, Sinugala, Lower Andarawava, Dimutugama and Valleyvava areas have been identified for the Elephant Management Reserve are no more. Farmers who have been lawfully engaged in their livelihoods for several years are at the receiving end of this crisis. Matters concerning this growing problem had figured during meeting of the Hambantota District Coordination Committee recently.
සංවර්ධන යෝජනා එනකොට අපිට පුළුවන්කමක් නැහැ ඒ සංවර්ධන යෝජනාවට දෙන්න මොකද ඒකට අලිකලමනාකරන ගැටලුව වෙනවා ඒක නිසා හරියටම අලිකලමනාකරන ඒකක වෙන් කරලා ඒක ගැසට් කරන එක අත්‍යවශ්‍ය දෙයක්
මේ ඉස්සරහට අපි ඒ ගැන තීන්දුව తీරන ගන්නවා මොකද මේ යෝජනාවලට මේ පයි අපි හිතියොත් මොකක්වත් කරන්නේ නැහැ සභාවතුමා ඒ වුණාට දැන් අපිට තියෙන ප්‍රශ්නේ තියෙන්නේ මම ඇතුළු මේ නිලධාරීන්ට මේ වැඩි ප්‍රශ්නයක් තියෙනවා මොකද නේද ඒක ඊට පස්සේ උත්තර දෙන්න ඔබතුමාට උත්තර දීලා ඔබතුමාලා ඒ පදනමත් එක මොන මට්ටමට ඉන්නවද කියලා අපි දන්නේ නැහැ අපිට එතකොට තියෙන ප්‍රශ්නේ තමයි මොකද අපි අවසානයේ මගෙත් එක්ක මම මේ නිලධාරීන්ට අවශ්‍ය උපදේශ දෙන්නත් ඕනේ වගකීම ගන්නවා අපි සංවර්ධන ආකල්පෙන් කියවත්ම.
The reason behind the delay in gazetting forest lands as part of the managed Elephant Reserve project remains a question in the minds of the fauna and flora loving public of the country. People believe that authorities who can stand their ground and take bold decisions are leaders of this country. Meanwhile, the third reading of the 2020 appropriation bill was passed in Parliament with amendments without a vote. Second reading of the 2020 appropriation bill passed in Parliament without a vote. The 2020 budget was presented by Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa in his capacity as a finance minister.
Honourable Speaker, in the recently published World Economic Outlook 20th October 2020 by the International Monetary Fund, it is forecasted that almost all the countries in the world are under a massive contraction due to the coronavirus pandemic. A monumental effort has been made towards the management of the coronavirus pandemic, even within the limitations arising from the vote on accounts, coupled with the weak budget and economy which we inherited. Nevertheless, the government has already spent around 70 billion rupees for the identification of patients, quarantining activities, random testing and related welfare activities. From 2020 onwards, annually, foreign debt servicing amounts to approximately 4,200 million US dollars. I am happy to report to this House that we have settled all debt obligations, including the foreign currency debts due to the year 2020. Our accomplishments in 2020, even amidst many challenges, are considerable, of which one of the key achievements is solving the unemployment issue of more than 60,000 graduates which have prevailed for years. By now, jobs have been provided to nearly 40,000 people under the program to provide jobs targeting 100,000 people from the poorest of the poorest families. We have reduced VAT and NBT from 17 to 8% and exempted most small and medium-scale businesses from VAT. I also propose to increase the borrowing limit stated in the appropriation bill by 180 billion rupees. It is the responsibility of our government to reduce the income expenditure gap to 4% of GDP by 2025, which now stands at nearly 10%, and reduce the overall debt to GDP to 75% of GDP within the next 4 years. We have to not only convert a negative economy to a positive high economy growth rate of 6%, but such growth should result in the eradication of poverty. I will present the proposal to create a modern economy in our country through vistas of prosperity to this House, through the budget speech 2021 on the 17th of November 2020.
සභාවට ඉදිරිපත් කරන ලබන 2020 අයවැය කතාව මගින් සෞභාග්‍ය දැක්ම තුලින් අපේ රටේ නවීන ආර්ථිකයක් ඇති කිරීමට යෝජනා ඉදිරිපත් කරනවා. මේ රටේ ඉතිහාසයේ කිසිම කාල
Never in Sri Lankan history has a government run a country without presenting a budget. With a minority government in 2015, we drafted and presented a budget within 2 months. We doubled the Samurdhi allowance and provided a hamper of nutritional food items. We reduced the price of gas and fuel. We increased salaries by 10,000 rupees. We did all of this within 100 days. Even after 365 days, the present government failed to present a budget. The government slashed taxes, resulting in the decline of state revenues. The government lost a revenue of approximately 600 billion rupees. But did the general public receive any concessions? Did the price of goods reduce? However, the government paved the way for their close associates and selected groups to benefit and earn profits. The government is now struggling without an income and is compelled to obtain more loans. They are trying to drown this country in debt.
අරගෙන මේ රට යට කරන්න උත්සාහ කරන්න. ඔබ අසමත්. ඒක තමයි මිනිස්සු කියන්නේ ගෝටා ෆේල් කියලා. මේක මම කියන එකක් නෙවෙයි මිනිස්සු පාරේ කියන ඒවා. 2020 ලංකා ඉතිහාසයේ ඉතා දුෂ්කර.
The year 2020 is one of the most difficult and uncertain years in the history of Sri Lanka. It has been an economically difficult year for all countries. Against such a backdrop, it is very challenging to manage an economy and a country. However, all the challenges we are compelled to face is not because of COVID-19. I must remind everyone that some of the problems are due to the wrong decisions taken during the past 5 years. Some factions are attempting to push us towards the IMF, sell our national assets, hinder state services and exacerbate rupee depreciation. These factions are plotting to defeat Although GDP growth declines in 2020, the government debt increases and unemployment increases, the government has implemented fresh measures to face these challenges. Our government is not afraid to take any decision. We will take the necessary decisions and pave the way for development.
The present government would complete 1 year on the 16th of November this year. If you analyze the progress report, you would understand that a fortune teller is not needed to predict our country's situation in the next 4 to 5 years. The presidential election was held on the 16th of November. The COVID-19 outbreak was in March the following year. The government had 4 months to provide relief to the general public. Tax reliefs amounting to more than 600 billion rupees were provided to the wealthy groups and the government was deprived of tax revenue. Due to this crisis, the government is in no position to provide rupees. But the price of salmon tin is 280 now. They said a kilo of Bombay onions will be given at 100 rupees. But now a kilo is 200 rupees. Try to understand these problems. The government recently announced that a kilo of sugar will be provided at 85 rupees. But a kilo of sugar is 135 rupees in the market. This is the ground reality. I remember how the now ruling party in the run-up to the presidential election made fun of us when we pledged to resolve the problems of the general public. However, today, all the proposals we made back then have proved to be correct. I proposed back then that we should provide an allowance of 20,000 rupees. Currently, those who are under self-quarantine for 2 weeks are provided with an allowance of 10,000 rupees. So someone under quarantine a month will require an allowance of 20,000 rupees. In the run-up to the presidential election, the ruling party in their posters said how the country had weakened. Never did I imagine that the creators of these slogans and posters had the talent to foresee the future state of our country. I will conclude my speech with a quote by Mahatma Gandhi about slavery.
විග්‍රහයක් වහල් භාවය යනු පාලකින් විසින් ඔබ සම්පූර්ණයෙන්ම විපතට හෙලා ඇති බව ඔබ දැන දැනත් ඔබ විසින් පාලකයාගේ ගුණ ගායනා කිරීම මම ප්‍රාර්ථනා කරනවා මහත්මා ගාන්ධිතුමාගේ වචන වලින් යම් අවබෝධයක් ලබාගෙන මේ රජයට කලගෙඩි නෙවෙයි ඔලුගෙඩි පාවිච්චි කරලා රට ශක්තිමත් කරන්න ප්‍රඥාව පහළ වේවා කියා ප්‍රාර්ථනා කරමින් මගේ කතාව අවසන් කරනවා.
Financial powers are vested with the parliament. However, the president has no powers to allocate funds between the time frame starting from the 30th of April and beginning of September in the budget proposal presented today. Two vote-on accounts were approved by the president during this period. No such thing has taken place in this parliament. It is very clear and certain that the constitution has been violated. However, the ruling party has disregarded the constitution. This is completely wrong.
අදමුලන නීතිය ක්‍රියාත්මක කරලා මේ කරන වැඩේ සම්පූර්ණ වැරදි 2020 අයවැය.
Why was a budget for the year 2020 brought forward at this point? We are all aware that the parliamentary election was postponed by 5 months due to the COVID-19 situation in the country. The president only had 3 months to allocate funds for the expenses incurred prior to the elections and post-elections. However, with the changes that took place, this time frame was excluded. Therefore, you cannot obtain parliamentary approval for this. So for the first time, we spent money allocated through a budget that could not be approved in parliament. We are aware that there are many issues with some of the decisions we took, but the ruling
එකට මේ කළ යුත්තේ කියලා මම විශ්වාස කරන්නේ මේ අරුබුදෙන් ගොඩ ආවොත් අපි සියලු දෙනාටම ගැළවිල්ලක් තියෙනවා කියලා මම විශ්වාස කරන්නේ.
අපි අස්තමයන්තු කරලා තියෙනවා.
Certain forecasts were made based on the figures presented in the appropriation bill. However, compared to what was presented by the Prime Minister, this is completely different. We looked into this difference. We identified that some of the unsettled bills that were incurred in 2020 have been backdated to 2009. During the Committee of Public Finance Proceedings, I asked the Treasury Secretary what they had done. He replied saying that they were presenting calculations in 2 different methods. He said if there is any mistake, they will take action in this regard, provided the Auditor General points out that this is wrong. So I spoke to the Auditor General thereafter. I asked him whether calculations can be made in such a manner. He clearly said that calculations cannot be presented in such a manner and it was wrong to do so. We believe that this is an attempt to fool everyone.
මෙහෙම ඉදිරිපත් කරන්න බෑ. Constitution very clearly says that Parliament shall have full control over public finance. No tax rate or any other levy shall be imposed by any local authority or any other public authority except by or under the authority of a law passed by Parliament or of any existing law. So there was no law until now. There is no law passed for the financial year 2020 that the Parliament has approved. What was approved were certain resolutions under Article 150 sub-article 2. So what can a resolution under 150 sub-article 2 authorize? It can only authorize the drawing from the consolidated fund such sums of money that are necessary for specified public services only. You cannot do any developmental work. You can pay to public services. That is all a resolution under Article 152 can do. There has been a severe need to make payments, to spend, to make grants to general public who were affected in areas, in several areas. In the whole country, people were given 5,000 rupees in the month of April and May. None of those are public services. Developmental activity was also carried out. All this in violation of the very strict limitation imposed by the provision in the Constitution that says for specified public services only.
4.45 trillion rupees was allocated through the 2019 budget for total state expenditure. In 2020, 2.69 trillion rupees was allocated for recurrent expenditure. Accordingly, the total state expenditure for 2020 stood at 4.54 trillion rupees.
Meanwhile, the central bank sold less than 1/4 of the treasury bills offered at yesterday's weekly treasury bill auction. The auction, which offered 40 billion rupees worth of treasury bills, sold only 9.12 billion rupees of treasury bills. The central bank had received bids worth 44.6 billion rupees, just 1.11 time of what was offered at the auction.
We had a bill auction yesterday and a bond auction today. Both these auctions, interestingly, has got undersubscribed. Yesterday, about 40 billion of bills were offered, and the accepted rate was very low at only about 9 billion out of 40 billion was accepted. In addition to that, if you take the bond auction, there also it was 24 bonds were the accepted rate was only about 30 billion out of the 40 billion. Then the 2027 bonds 35 billion was offered and only 18.7 billion was accepted.
We now cross over to Razan for the weather update.
Good evening, you're joining me Azrasan from the Weather Center. Sri Lanka is currently experiencing the second inter-monsoon. During the second inter-monsoon, Sri Lanka usually experiences heavy showers in the evening hours. If you take a look at the weather forecast for the next 24 hours, the Met Department says that showers exceeding 100 millimeters can be expected from western, Sabaragamu and central provinces of condition. Strong winds can also be expected. The Met Department requests the general public to be vigilant about the prevailing rainy weather condition in the country. Around 200 houses were damaged due to strong winds in Galipitiagama, Nikavaratia. Several houses in Nikavaratia North, Galipitiagama, Heaven Palace, Budumuttava and Karakole were damaged. According to our correspondents, electricity in the area was disrupted. The Nikavaratia Divisional Secretary has initiated the process of providing immediate relief to the affected people.
And with that, Fernando, do take care and stay safe.